let's kick it off. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our hand tool special interest group. I am hoping that this is going to be the last one that we do purely on Zoom. We have plans afoot to do the next one as an in-person here in this classroom. I know that Travis and Lewis have been working on getting things set up really nicely for that. So this next one will be an in-person one. I'm not quite sure how we go. Obviously, we're going to have to only have a certain limit. I don't think with our group we have to worry about that, but we'll be posting something about that fairly soon, I hope. But anyway, so we'll actually be able for the very first time to start holding this special interest group at a point where we can look at each other in the eyes and talk. But we're going to retain a hybrid where we have people on Zoom as well, and we have a nice big TV screen here, so we'll be able to see you and listen to you and have you participate as much as you can with the geographic distance. But so that's going to be really cool, and we're looking forward to it. I'm very much looking forward to it. So moving on to the challenge of the day, which is before all of these, the really nice joinery was widely used, where people had to make furniture and benches and usable things like trestle tables fairly quickly and have them be strong and simple and not worry too much about the ornateness of them. There's a method of furniture making, or of making particularly chairs and tables and benches, where that's known as staked furniture. And what it does is it has, you have a very strong leg set at an angle with both there are two, I can never remember which one is which. From the front of the piece, I think the angle this way is rake, and from the side of the piece, the angle this way is display. And you cut a hole using both of those angles, which I'll show you how to do, either most of the way through a nice solid piece of wood, or all of the way through, as in this case. And because I went all of the way through, I wedged it at the end. And you can see an illustration of the way it's wedged up here. This is basically a cross-section of a nice thick piece of wood with one of these legs going into it, and it has a conical shaped, you'll notice it's in a conical hole, and it's a conical shaped leg. So they marry together at whatever the angle it is that you cut it at. They marry together because they're both at the same angle there. And then you cut a kerf down the middle here, and you put a wedge in there, and that holds it really tight. And you can even dispense with glue at that point. Glued this one together with hide glue because I just can't get to that point where I'm only gonna use a wedge. But anyway, I made this as a saw bench to a very traditional design from a Chris Schwartz book, who I mentioned last week. And these are specifically, or this is specifically, a hand tool saw bench, so that I can either rip or cross cut on this. I don't do a whole lot of sawing with an old-fashioned saw, but I do bring home large pieces of wood and only have a 14-inch width that I can cut on, or not width, length that I can cut, as it were, in a cross cut on the bandsaw. So if I need a piece that's 3 foot long out of a 12-foot long piece or 6 foot long piece of wood, I'm going to have to cut it by hand, whether I have generally speaking, even if I have a table saw, that's going to present a challenge on a large piece of wood. So even just cutting a large piece of wood in half, a couple of these, and you're set. It's at just the right height, because we've controlled the height, and it's nice and strong, and just the right height for me to be able to get my eye on the line. I'm not going to saw all the way through, but you can see it's just, for me, it's the right height. Using one of these on the bench generally means I have to get up on something in order to use it. But anyway, so it's a fun way to use your saw, and you can create a nice little saw bench, which is great for when you feel a little tired and you can't be bothered to do anything else, you just take the saw bench and sit down on it. And it's nice and strong. I won't climb up on it, but I have climbed up on this and bounced around. And it's, if you make it with the right wood for the legs, it's really nice and strong. But anyway, stake furniture, no aprons, simple construction, 5 pieces for a 4-legged table, 5 pieces of construction pieces that become one. And you don't have to worry about expansion and contraction of the wood because these are fitted into the wood, so the legs will move ever so slightly as the wood moves. So we're not going to have those kind of problems or strains that cause cracks or anything like that. So nice thick surface or a nice thick top, you know. A workbench is classic. I put out an article on the blog the other day with some old drawings of benches, and almost all of them were staked in one form or another. Generally speaking, you know, it's a simple construction method. It's a leg that's actually set in the top. Whether you use conical tenons like this, or cylindrical tenons, or conventional tenons, either way. But this is a great way to deal with the angles without having to do fancy joinery in order to get everything nicely married up together. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how you do that. Let me just gather myself here. So this book by Chris Schwartz. Last week, last time, we talked about the Anarchist tool chest. This is the Anarchist design book. And in it, he goes into basically how to start designing your own furniture, including reference to books that specifically refer to human ergonomics in terms of furniture and room sizes, and, you know, how close a dining room should be to the people, how much space you allow for the chair, how much you need behind the table, or, you know, behind the chair for people to walk there. So it's a great book, really interesting, and it actually, there you go, there's the saw bench. An old drawing, and an old design, but something like this can be made pretty quickly. You know, I'm sure a skilled carpenter could make one of these in an afternoon. It doesn't have to have octagonal legs. You can get away with 4-way legs. But anyway, great book, and he shows a way to do your double angle through, or a way to use geometry loosely to create that double angle that makes it really quite simple. So that's what I want to demonstrate today. Hopefully at the end of it, we'll be actually putting a 3-legged stool together. So what we are doing is, I'm actually going with the design idea. I just decided that here is a piece, a chunk of wood. I cut out a vaguely oval shape, and then I figured out where I want the 3 legs to be, because I want to try. I never made a 3-legged stool, so I want to do that. And then I'll take this big chunk and I'll round off all the edges and make it all nice and sort of rounded. And if I like it, well, I'll keep it. And if I don't like it, or if I like it and I don't want it, I'll pass it on. And if I don't like it, somebody else might. So I've already cut 2 of the legs, but I'm going to go back to the design factor. No, I didn't talk about this guy down here yet, did I? Okay, I'll talk about that later, if I remember. So what you do, one of the keys to designing furniture, or almost anything else, is to start off with a conceptual mock-up, right? So in this case, to mock up something like a stool or a Windsor chair, or a chair of a similar design, again, using stake furniture, because Windsor chairs, the backs are staked into the Windsor chair. And that's one of the advantages of a stake chair, is the back and the back legs are not one piece, such as with a chair like this, where they're one piece. So you've got a limit as to how much room you have behind the spine, as it were. There's a limit to how far that can go back. Whereas if you design carefully, you can put the back of the chair, you know, if you use a different shaped seat, you can put the back of the chair further back, which is one of the things that makes, for example, Windsor chairs very comfortable, is the fact that the legs are in a different planes, as it were, from the back. So anyway, you make a mock-up. So in this case, I just took a piece of MDF. I'm making a 50% or a half-scale model in order to just play around with concepts. So very simply, took a piece of MDF, cut it to the shape I want. It's exactly, believe it or not, half the size of that piece I was just showing you, except for the thickness. But it was the legs I want to. And then I took a piece of wire hanger. I decided where the legs were going to be. So I put the two front legs here and the one back leg here, which is a little further forward of the back of the stool. And I just drilled holes down in here and super glued 12-inch pieces of wire hanger. So once they were super glued in, then I can play around with bending them. Do I want my back leg to be splayed out that far? It could easily trip someone over, because if now I set that up, you can see it sticks way out the back of the piece. So you play around with the ideas, you get everything so you think it's lined up reasonably well. And then once you think, you go, okay, well, these two here, the front legs, they seem to be reasonably lined up. And here's my back leg, and it's not sticking out too far beyond the back here. And these are sticking out a little bit, but, you know, if push really comes to shove, I'll take an inch or two off of the piece. But we'll see how it works. You can get away with coming outside of your seat to a certain degree, but the moment that people passing by or people trying to sit down in the chair begin to trip on the edges, then you probably want to moderate that rake and splay. So there's room for whatever you choose to do. Now, so the first thing I did was I created a center line down the front to back of the piece, and I created another center line on the side to side, which gave me a center. And from that center, I was able to, and from these two lines, I was able to extrapolate a rectangle here. The rectangle is important in order to transfer your angles. That's the only reason it's there, is in order to transfer some angles. So having set up that rectangle and got my pieces spaced as I want, so this is the back leg and these are the two front legs, what I do is I get myself down here in line with the piece, and I start turning it until it looks like my piece is straight up and down. And I can double check that if I want, or use this as an aid. You've got to remember that you have stereoscopic vision. So if you're using one eye, it might be a little deceptive. Sometimes a level in the same line helps, but as long as the piece looks reasonably straight, you're going to be close to the angle. So you probably won't use that much. So once I've got it straight like that, I can see my eye and the piece are such that the piece looks absolutely straight up and down to me. So now I can take, while I've got my eye back here, I can take a nice long ruler and create the sight line of that straight up and down. Hold my ruler on there and then draw my line, right? And by doing that, and it looks confusing, but the instructions are in that book, and we may even have a copy of it in the library. Once you follow it through step by step, it's really easy. But so I've created this sight line, which gives me one of my angles. That gives me, in effect, its angle in relation to this center line. So you can see my pieces coming out there. But by getting it to where, now maybe you guys can see, to get where you see where it looks reasonably straight there. I'm not sure exactly how the camera sees it, but you can see it's in that line. If you were looking this up and down, you'd see it looks reasonably straight. So that's how you establish that line. And I did it on the two front ones. On the back one, I only need one angle because it's coming straight out at the back. So I just did that off of the middle line and I measured that angle. already cut that one. So that's what I did. And you'll notice that as you were in the close-up, you'll notice that that came out at 52 degrees. Okay, and here we have, you'll notice there's a comment, included angle is 8 degrees. That is the angle at which, once you've lined this one up for that one, the other angle, I'm sorry, I can't quite put it into plain English, but you'll see as we go on. But anyway, this angle of 8 degrees is essentially, yes. I can illustrate it pretty well. Where it's an angle that's been measured by lining that black piece up there. See, so I can take that, I can line this up with that angle, and then I can measure that angle using a protractor, and then note it down here, because I'm going to need it to transfer. So now, I want to go to my actual piece. And I'm going to focus on the one that I haven't cut. You'll see that I've got, this is my dummy leg, as it were, because my actual legs are tapered, so they're not going to do very well with looking at to be straight. This is a dummy leg that I can measure angles with if I need to. You'll see that that's already cut, which is the back leg. And you'll see that's pretty close to that angle. It's not perfect because measuring it with that little protractor can be a bit difficult, but there is no need for me to measure that particular angle. What I have to do, though, is establish what this sight line is here. So you remember it was measured at 52 degrees. So I take a protractor and I will set that at 52 degrees, and I may well set it on the wrong side of the protractor. Yeah, so I'll set it over on the other side. Most protractors are marked both ways. Okay, there we go. Haven't quite got it right. There we go. There's one way to see. So I use a protractor, set up these lines, put this line across here, running through the hole that I previously marked as to exactly where the leg is going to be. Right. So now I know that as I drill, I'm going to be drilling from an angle over here. So I'm going to set it up. It look a little arcane so far. Believe it or not, it's much simpler when you actually work yourself through it. But what I'm going to do, for the sake of demonstrating, I've already cut this one here, and I have a measurable angle. Now, whether I cut exactly the previous measured angle, this is what it is. So rather than trying to go to the previous measured angle, I'm going to measure that angle. And you can see there that I can never forget I forgot, bevel gauge. This bevel gauge is pretty close to parallel to that line there. So I know that angle, all I got to do is set that angle up. And then what I'm going to do in essence, and I'll turn it sideways so you can see. I'm going to take this out just for convenience. But in essence, I'm going to set this up. I'm going to tape it to the seat. And then I'm going to come in with a brace and bit. And instead of all that worrying, which I'll talk about in a moment before I do this, about setting the drill press up and the thing being upside down, I can look at this and I can say, okay, that's pretty much where I want my leg to be. And I can even take the leg and go put it next door to it and go, okay, that's about right. That's how I want it. So looking at it from a bunch of different angles, get that angle set up, which we'll do next. So I'm going to diversify here because I mentioned this problem of setting up these angles on a drill press. I haven't done a whole lot of chairs. This one I did in a chair making class, and the challenge was really setting up the angle of the back legs here. So the real challenge was doing that, and you had to set them up in a jig and then set it up so that you've got a drill press coming downwards into the hole at exactly the right angle, two ways, because you can see these holes are, there's a slight angle on these stretchers. So you got that angle two ways, and you set it up in a jig, and once you set it up, you transfer it over to the drill press, and if you should, God forbid, you should move something, you end up with something that's not quite right. Whereas if you're doing something like this by hand, it's much, much easier in terms of speed and time. And to give you an example, those of you who've been with us for a while will remember I did a section on turning stool legs to octagons and then ultimately into circular like this without using a lathe. These were the pieces that I demonstrated with, and when I did a demonstration with the Travis here, this was the seat that we used. Now, that we used and I cut that day. And when I went to drill, I took it into the shop here and I very, very, very carefully set it up. And instead of drilling the rake that way, I drilled it that way. So I drilled my angles the wrong way around because of that difficulty. I have a lot of difficulty with turning things upside down. Using router tables is sometimes a challenge for me the same way. So I ended up with something where my holes were completely wrong. So I plugged them with some black acacia, thought I could get it, reasonably nicely done, and that I put some pieces in the top and so on, because it was the top where it really showed up. And when I put it all together at the end, everything was loose and it wasn't right. There were huge gaps and so on. So and it wasn't going to look good. So what I did was put it aside, and I was going to just can it and do a complete new lid with the one that new seat with the one that I'm going to show you in a minute. And then as I was doing these saw benches, I put this thing together and I thought, maybe we can do something with this. So this was a couple of weeks ago. What I did was I put the whole thing together. I wedged the tenons, and got them nicely set and working, but they looked like hell. So I took my brace and bit, and the predecessor of the Forstner bit is called a center bit. And it looks like this, and it works with a brace and bit. And basically what I did was I took this and I drilled down, because it gives you a nice even bottomed hole, or relatively even bottomed hole, drilled down about 1/4 of an inch, and then filled it with epoxy, and then filled the bubble holes with white stuff. And both Lewis and I think it looks a bit like looking out from your space in the space station, or looking through a telescope or whatever. But anyway, I'm happy with it. It looks fun, and I'll be using it for years in my shop. So, hey there. Yeah. Okay, so that's one way to deal with it, just by trying to do something different. But if you want to get it right, I decided I wasn't going to be victim to this drill press thing anymore. And I've been sort of, over time getting to know brace and bit. So what I'm going to do is to make that conical shape, I'm going to drill a 5/8 hole all the way through at the right angle, and then I'm going to ream it out. So and I'm going to create that cone, this shape, on the inside here. And you'll see that fits nicely in there. You can see why we need to wedge at the top, because when you cut through at an angle like that, you end up with an oval shape. So that'll need a wedge at the top there, or wood. And I've just epoxied this knot hole, because it'll probably disappear as I carve it, but I just wanted a piece of wood that had some integrity. So those two are done and tested. So now what I want to do is I want to be sure that I've got the same, what's called the resultant angle. There's that. So I need to make a slight, make sure that's in there. And this is an eyeball thing. You can either transfer it over from the angle on your wire hangers, or you can eyeball it to parallel. One of the forgiving things about this kind of leg is, especially when you taper it, nothing's really square anyway, so it's hard to tell if things are a little bit off. So that's another very forgiving thing about stakes furniture, is that if things are a little out of true, it doesn't matter and the eye will be fooled anyway. So that's pretty much the right angle. First thing I'm going to do is to clamp my piece down, and because I'm going to be working on this and carving it, I don't care about bruising it, so I'm going to clamp it directly to the piece, but otherwise I would use a caul. Now, I don't need to hold it really. It's not like I'm going to have a drill bit going at a fast speed right now, so I'm not. All I've got to do is hold it firmly in place. And then the next thing I'm going to do, this is a 5/8 bit, is I'm going to set that up so it's parallel to where my bit needs to run, but gives me enough room to at least get the thing started with my drill bit. So now I know that that's about where I want it. I can either mark a pencil mark and walk away, or I can lay it down or do whatever. But I want to tape it down. So these things change, their balance changes as you move the bevel. So what I want to do is put the center line of the bevel along the center line of my hole there. Again, it doesn't have to be held terribly secure. It's just got to be held steady in place. So you don't need, don't need packing tape or anything like that. If I were doing this, a lot of these, I would, or making repeated copies of them, I would probably make myself a nice angled jig to give the guidelines. Okay, so now we've got it set up. So far, we haven't turned on any electrical machines or got anything going that's going to make a noise. But there's more noise in this room from my voice than anything else. All right, so 5/8 bit. By the way, a brace and bit, usually the minimum you want when you have a brace and bit is a set of about 16 bits, going from a 1/16 of an inch up to usually 15/16. You don't often see one in a kit that's at 1 inch, but you can get 1 inch ones as well. Or you can use things like the center bit, which works remarkably well for something that looks so crude, and it fits in the brace and bit. Anyway, so I've secured this in the brace and bit, or now it is a brace and bit. It's not a brace and a bit. It's a brace and bit. And I'm going to get myself to where I can get my eye line going down here and looking along this line here. So in this case, I'm going to put myself up on a stool, and Lewis is going to be my spotter. So what he's going to do is, it's easy. It's a piece of cake to keep yourself in line with this here. So I can watch that. What he's going to do is he's going to go to the side and he's going to tell me if I stop being parallel to this edge. So if you come around here, this is what has to be spotted when you first start.
Hey, Paul?
Yes.
Just a quick question. In this case, spotting is to keep that bit parallel, not to keep you from falling off the stool, correct?
Absolutely right. Not unless I've had a few beers.
Okay, just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
And that hasn't happened for a few decades. So here we go. So he is literally spotting. In my case, in my case, Donald spotted me when I first did this and did a great job. But after a couple of times of doing it, you get the idea from this line on the bevel gauge there. I found I have a slight tendency to go like that, so I try to compensate for that. If I'm slightly off, doesn't matter too much, because you remember that's an oval hole there, and we've still got more to do on the hole. It's a reamer, so we're going to ream this hole once it's cut. You'll also note that there is a piece of waste wood underneath, because I don't want to drill through my bench, and I need to drill through all the way. So two things need to happen. First of all, I don't want to have tear out on the top if I can avoid it, because this could be, if it were a Windsor chair, it would be much thinner, and it may be close to where I want to cut it through. And I want to go all the way through, and so I don't want to cut through my bench. I want this waste wood to be what I do. Now, okay, so now at this point, if we were using a drill press, we turn the drill press on, we make sure that everything is secured, we drill the hole, we make sure that hole is done, and now we move to another hole. Now you've got to take that piece and reline it and reclamp it and probably spend 5 minutes redoing it unless you make yourself a jig. Whereas once I'm done with this, I can just turn around, take this, and move on to the next one. So this is one of those few occasions when it can be more efficient. How am I doing with this?
Or towards this
Go
Yep,
up?
yep,
Yeah,
right
I got that tendency. I don't mind going a little more up than sideways. What you don't want is legs splaying out. If I'm by myself, once I'm an inch in, I can step away from this and look at it. And I can see that I'm already slightly tending to go in that way. So I know now to compensate as I go through. Still in line with here. Again, if I want to double check, I can even line up the brace here, and boom, you can see the line that you're going for. So to continue, this is what I love about working with hand tools. You can stop in the middle of it and evaluate what you're doing. You don't have to go, ooh, you know, and just go through that with that drill bit. And it's quiet. And I will know when I'm through my piece by the feel of it, because this plywood that it's going to drill into.
Do you think maybe the tendency to come towards you is because the strength of your swing is on the downswing? Like when your arm swings down, you tend to pull them when you push up.
Yeah, good thinking. It's always worth thinking about body mechanics there. But yes, it could be. So then you have to train yourself to try and have a, you know, like, for example, to release on that push, release some of the energy there. And I'm still training myself to do this, but and that noise is probably the drill bit scraping the sides of the hole. I'm getting close to through. There you go. You see, I'm already getting some blonde shavings there. So although on this occasion I didn't see that I was or feel that I was fully through, I know that's part of this piece underneath. So now I'll probably go another half a turn just to make sure I'm through this piece. And these incidentally have a ratchet, so that if things are getting tough, you can. Having said that, the ratchet's not working. Yeah, you can do it like this, basically.
Now, is this the situation that by the time you see white, it's too late because it's got to travel back up?
Well, it depends how thick the piece you're going into is. I found that thus far, unless I've gone too far, I haven't, that's enough. And to be honest, if I drill into my bench, I can fill it with epoxy. You know, my bench is a working environment, so I don't worry too much about it. So I believe I'm most of the way through. Let me put that Brayson bit down. I love the Brayson bit. It's just such a nice, old school, quiet way. And the whole key to it, by the way, is keeping them sharpened. Just like using a plane, this is a specialty file for sharpening auger bits. The reason it's a specialty is because it has what's called a safe side. There's no file on the edge here, only on the faces. And then over here, you think, oh, that's just the handle, but actually it's got a file on the side. So I can get, you know, on a small drill bit, I can just get in and do that. So basically, the surfaces I'm going to sharpen doing this are this piece here cuts through the wood and cuts the initial circle. This is the lead screw, and this is what actually pulls the drill bit through. And then these are the cutting blades here. So we leave the bottom of that alone, just like you leave the back of the plane alone once you've got it set. And we sharpen. You got to get set up just right. And you know, if I were on my bench, I'd be sharpen like that. It doesn't have to be plane sharp. It just has to be sharp enough to cut through the wood. So that's basically how it works. The lead screw pulls it through. Forgotten the name of them. If you like wings, we'll call them wings. They actually cut the circle, so they actually cut the hole, and then the flat blades here take out the rest of the piece. It's elegantly simple as long as it's sharp. For years I tried doing this, didn't know how to sharpen these things, and I thought it was just, what's the point? There's more hard work involved. But with this, there's no downward pressure whatsoever, no pressure to put it in because that lead screw is pulling it through. So,
Paul,
yes.
What surfaces are you sharpening? Is the two blades at the bottom and the lead the only parts that get sharpened?
Yes, it's the edge of here.
Yeah.
And again, I only need to worry about the leading edge because the back edge just needs to be nice and smooth. So I sharpen there.
Okay.
And then on the other side, I'll sharpen there. And then on the back side here, I have to kind of go left-handed with this because I like to sharpen away from the blade. But so it's a bit like a little chisel blade.
So it's just those four surfaces then?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
because you're not going to redo the thread on the lead.
Yeah.
And the rest is about having the bore be nice and clean so it goes cleanly through the wood.
Got it.
So if there's a lot of rust, you want to clean that off. But that's all the sharpening is, and this is a $17 sharpening tool. It's exclusively made made in Italy.
That makes it seem much more reasonable and undertaking to sharpen that auger bit, because when someone looks at it from afar, you'd think there are sharpening surfaces all around that need to be sharpened, but it's just those four edges that need to be sharpened.
Absolutely, yes. And if you start sharpening, for example, on the curved side, then you reduce the size of the drill hole. So, and what's up here is still the bigger size. So now you have problems. So you specifically only want to sharpen those four surfaces.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
But it does make it a piece of cake. And this little tool, you can do it with all sorts of different files, but this makes it just a piece of cake. Okay, so let's see if we got all the way through. Let me put these back in there. Little container. And get something else out. Okay, so now I've got to take it out. I've unclamped it. I will use the clamp again in a moment. You see I'm all the way through here. But this is the top, which is going to be carved. So even though I've taken out a little bit there, there's no big deal because it's going to be carved and wedged and all that fun stuff. So as you can see, at the top, you've got a nice little triangle of legs coming in. These two are lined up. Yes, these two are lined up. And we're going to now ream it out. So we're now going to create that conical part of this.
You don't traverser this first?
No, absolutely not, because it would be impossible to lay flat on the surface. And you've got enough challenges with the angles already. You've got to have some things at 90 degrees in order to make this work. You basically got to have something to register on. Sometimes when you're making furniture and it's got for example, you're making a chair back, and now I'm talking from reading, not from personal experience. when you make the mortise, because the back of the chair might be curved, you ensure that it's flat. You know, you do those little custom things that you know, hand tooling makes easier, so that when you put your stretcher in there with the tenon, it fits nicely. Otherwise, it's gonna. I don't know if that diversion made any sense, but okay. So now traditionally, again, you can buy, or you could buy reamers. This is a reamer. It's a small one, but it's at 12 degrees, and a lower angle is more traditional. Actually, 6 degrees is more traditional. This one's designed for a brace and bit, but it's not big enough for the hole we're working with today. This one is designed to fit in, you know, many different forms of drill holders. And then the one we're going to use today after we've we've reamed this out, we'll talk about how we make the end of the legs. So this thing is wicked sharp, so I really want to be careful with it. I thought I want to use this by hand for the demo, so I bought a piece to fit into a brace and bit that would have a hex piece like this, but I forgot to check the measurement, and this is a bigger piece. So I'm going to have to use the other kind of cordless drill today. However, with a brace and bit, I could easily do this just as easily. And like I say, this is much the same in terms of its cutting ability. It's got this one edge that cuts really well. You never ever want to sharpen this outside edge because that creates the geometry you need. But this is a nice, easy one to sharpen with almost any kind of file because you can get in there. It's at 90 degrees. And you can make this just as sharp as you want. You never touch this backside. It's already in pretty good shape. Same here. I don't need to sharpen this because I know it's in good shape. But that's all I really need to do is have a something with a square edge, you know, a file with a square edge. There we go. That's sharpened. So what I want to show you, you won't see it now, but this baby is going to come through like about there, and it's going to stick down through the bottom. So I've got to bear that in mind. So I'm going to clamp this in such a way that the bottom is out in space rather than being, because that thing's not a drill. It's specifically for creating that angle, but it doesn't have a cutting bit on the end. If it hits wood, it just comes up against it. So that's the angle I want to go in at. As you can see, I've got a little bit of flexibility here, so I can still mess with my angle slightly. So again, I'm going to put this in place just because it's convenient, even with the cordless drill, because the same sightline principles apply. I'm going to get up on my wonderful Rubbermaid piece. Now, where did I put the drill bit? Oh, right there. So I'm going to, and these are not cheap, so I want to treat it with respect as well. But, you know, you can look on the internet and buy something like this for next to nothing, and all you got to do is follow the same sharpening principle, but with all the edges, and just figure out which edge is going to be the cutting edge. So, okay, I think that looks about lined up right, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little ways through and then check it. So here we go. I'm on slow speed. I don't want to be on a fast speed here. And because I was traveling with it, well, not traveling, but bringing it from home, I had it set so it wouldn't run. That looks about right. Sorry. I'm glad you had a mask on for that. All right, so here's my sample leg. And if I take this and bring it close by, you can see that not really the same angle anymore. So I'm going to change my angle of so what I want to do is go up a little bit. Now again, these things are forgiving. If you get the right general angle, it's quite forgiving. Sorry. Getting closer. That to me, that's good enough. I still want to bring that baby up a smidgen. No, I don't. Actually, I've backed it up to where it's too far up. So down a little bit, but not much. Are we all the way through? Yes, that's just, as long as the whole of that nub is sitting through, then I can cut that off flat. Let's see if we've got us a stool or not. And this will be my first actual test of whether this stool is a viable design, whether I like the shape of it or not. This is what it is. Whoa. Okay. You can see some of the things that happen in my shop. Okay, obviously I'm going to have to level the bottoms, but what I do now is I put the whole stool together and then test it. I mean, glue it up, and then we'll level the feet. So can I sit on it? Yeah, pretty stable.
That was really bold of you to do just then. Oh my goodness.
All right, no glue, nothing. But you see, the virtue of the joint is that it's self-tightening. So if you wanted a folding stool, a top and 3 pieces, huh?
What you're not seeing right now is Lewis having a heart attack off camera.
But you know, it's kind of satisfying when you do that and you go, okay, it'll work. And then if I were wanting to make a...
Hey, Paul?
Yes.
Can you do a handstand on the stool too, please?
Please.
Have we got an ambulance standing by? Not because I think the stool would fail, I think I would fail. Oh gosh. Well, that was one of the shortest, but now I want to talk a little bit about making the legs. So let's unstool this. So now what I'm going to do, here's some considerations that I'm beginning to learn. First of all, when you put these together, and if you're going to put a finish on them, and you want them to look nice, these are actually saw benches, but I'm going to make a few for the holiday gift sale that, you know, will be something that maybe people will buy. But as I put the legs together, I'll be considering the grain, considering the facets of the octagon, so that I get them kind of lined up so there's a little bit more symmetry. But that's my personal, you know, sort of what desire to want to kind of fine the design down. But you know, it's a fun thing. You don't invest 3 weeks of your time into it. In this case, this is made up out of 2 pieces of like 6/4 and another piece that I glued on the side because I didn't have a lot of sycamore available. This one is just 2, one on top of the other. But I'm thinking that this would be a nice little sort of garden stool or something like that if you just, use a Travisher or something to cut a little bit of human body shape, shall we call it, in there. So anyway, yes.
Hey, Paul?
Yes.
I missed the very beginning. Was there an origin story to this? Is it a particular maybe design or a particular period of history when these things were made?
Well, yes, I talked about how in the early days, for millennia, this was a very good, quick way to build furniture, and didn't involve a tremendous amount of training and craftsmanship in order to do it. And it gave you a very, very strong construction without aprons and such like. So,
Okay.
something like this saw bench. Yes.
I missed the beginning. I just was curious. I don't want to derail you. I just was wondering if it was like a shaker thing, or I don't know, just when there was an origin story like that. But it's the simplicity of construction and the sturdiness of it.
Yes. Let me pull up a picture in the book, and maybe we can get a close up on it. Even this is from, I don't know if you know of the French guy Roubaud, but he wrote a very
He made the bench, right?
Huh?
He made that bench, yeah.
Yes, right. So this is one of his bench designs, and if you look closely at it, you'll see that the mortises come clear through the piece. The mortise and tenons there, they're coming clear through the piece. So that's a staked bench in a sense. And then, if you'll bear with me while I quickly flip through, I did put up some other pictures on the blog. Let's see if I can find. I don't want to spend too much time looking, but I think there are a couple of other of those.
If you haven't had a chance to check out this book, I felt that the pages are so thick. It's very quality material.
Huh. Is it in the shop library?
I'm not sure if there's a copy of it.
And there's your bench.
I think there's one, but I'm not absolutely sure. You can certainly buy it from Lee Nielsen, and you can buy it from, I imagine, from Lost Art Press, who published this anyway. But if you look at this picture here, you look at this and you see that almost all of the equipment these carpenters are using is staked. Can
you get us closer again?
Yeah. You see, there's your saw benches.
Oh, yeah.
And they're all working with benches that are and equipment that is staked. And, it gives you something, you can work it hard, it's very strong, and at the end of the day, you can make it again quickly.
Oh, that's excellent. Great. Thank you.
And that last shot was of 3 different sizes of saw bench that you can make. The last size you can actually use as for example, as a base for a trestle dining table to take out into your, put out under the oak tree on the estate and set out a dinner. But it's an old technique. It still works well, and it's kind of fun because you can play around with it. You don't have to, if I spent a lot of time making boxes, basically, whether it's furniture that's a series of boxes that are put together or drawers or whatever, and I wanted to sort of head off in a different direction. And I know at least one of our members, David, is doing much the same kind of thing. It's kind of fun. I really would like to get into chair making because it's something that you can make very personal for people. You can, put a lot of thought into the for want of a better word, the shape and size and weight of the person and what they want to do in this chair, and design something that's really comfortable. By being able to make them quickly, you can play with ideas. So I'll bring this back to you guys when I finished with it. I like the tapered legs because I think the construction like this is enormously strong, but it's kind of very solid and Teutonic looking to me. So, you adapt your legs for whatever you do. So let me just address. Okay, I've got to take my stool to pieces, which is now set quite nicely in place. So you can see there's the construction of it. So basically what I have to do is whatever shape my leg is here, in this case it's tapered, but whatever shape the leg is, from about half an inch beyond where it's going to, where it's going to end up seated, you have to use a draw knife or a spoke shave. I'm lucky enough to have a draw knife, so which makes it really easy and very precise and just great. But you basically create that 12-degree angle, and largely by putting a 5/8 hole at one end. In this case, we're using 5/8. Put a 5/8 hole at one end, and then a marker around here. You can see my pencil lines there. And then I'll create with the, you could do it with a spoke shave, you could even do it with a plane if you had to, or a knife even. But once you've created that general shape, now you want to fine it. And this is, I love this. You can make them out of wood, you can make them out of yourself very easily, but it's a tapered, it looks like a pencil sharpener. For all the world, it's exactly the same principle as a pencil sharpener, except it doesn't give you a sharp tip. But you mount this in the vise, which I haven't got a vise set up here, so my left hand will be the fake vise. You mount this in the vise, and once you've cut the general shape here, you stick it in. It's squeaking.
Oh my God,
because
it is a giant pencil sharpener.
It really is, yeah. It's squeaking because it's already up against the shoulder and it's far enough. But that squeaking noise tells me, will usually give me a line around here, and then I need to shave a little bit off in order to allow it to progress. And once, if you're dealing with a very thick piece, once you get to the point where you've used up all the blade length, it just starts cutting at about a 5/8 dowel there. So you can go a little ways further in. But really nice piece of equipment.
Do those come in a variety of angles, or is 12% the standard?
The 12% is what's commonly sold. If I can get this open, traditionally there are different angles. 6%. I've just got some old brace bits that will cut a 6% wedge form or 6% tone. This is a smaller size. This is 5/8, but you can get them. This one is 3/8, for example. You can see the hole there. So you can get them in different sizes, and you can probably get them in different angles. But you at this point, you're probably, in this day and age, you're probably better off making one if you want that 6-degree angle. You can still buy the old bits, but almost everything made today is at 12 degrees. This is Veritas. They sell them now. They make them. They work very well. And then they also have another tool that they sell, which I've demonstrated before, which gives you the cylindrical tenon, such as we have on this baby. So you can see there that it shoulders up, and that's actually just a cylindrical tenon going through there. There's another advantage, apart from the obvious, that as you set down on even one that's unglued, it holds together. But the other big advantage is that when you glue this together, because of the conical shape, there's a great deal more long grain to long grain in that joint than there is when you think, if you put a cylinder on the end of this, almost the entire thing is going to be close to end grain. And when you drill through a straight hole through here, it's almost entirely end grain. So this gives you a stronger bond between the glue and the seat. Plus, you have the surefire thing that once that puppy's in there, you don't have to jiggle around and adjust it or worry about surfaces meeting each other because they're already there. And you can do this by hand as well. I haven't done the reaming. I don't know how I would do that except by using a bracing bit. But you could certainly cut these cones by hand. They're just unlikely to be as precise. So if anybody is thinking of getting something like this or thinking of starting to make chairs, talk to me about it, and we'll see if we can't find a way to share things, because because I don't use these very often. Okay, so that pretty much concludes the presentation. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm just going to warble on a little bit more about how much I'm looking forward to actually having people here in person. And I'd really like to extend all of you a warm invitation to join us. Travis, what do you think is our people limit going to be on that? And how are we going to ask people to come?
Well, I'll tell you that we can use Gary's holiday gift sale as a guide, at least so far as the shop is concerned. If nothing is going on, but yours are always on Saturday mornings, but if nothing is going on, we had as many as 9 people in the shop in the bench room. Now you've got a smaller room there, and I have typically had as many as 6 or 7 in there between teachers, TAs, and instructor. So I think that's probably the right thing. We need to run it by Dallas and Gary for the copacetic number to be working with. But I think that's not only a reasonable number, but it's a reasonable number for that room. Because look at how you've got it set up right now. Louis, can you just pan so that people can see? There's not a lot of seating once you've got all this set up, right? So there's maybe 4 or 6 people who can easily fit in there and give you your room to work. So I guess that's what I'm thinking, is that between the 2 of you plus 4 in the audience, that might be as much as we can handle. If more showed up, I guess we could try to accommodate it. But we have so many people who are double vaccinated already. And that just makes it a whole lot safer. I know you wanted to get your 2nd vaccination before you even considered it. When is that happening?
That is happening next Thursday in Oceanside.
Yay, congratulations.
Yeah, so I'm actually, the next Zoom will be the first in-person one, and then I'm teaching a sharpening class the following day, and I'll be contacting Sharon about getting back in as a chef supervisor. So I am really looking forward to rejoining the human race.
Hey, Paul, why don't we go forward with sort of 2 ideas. One is that people who want to be there in person actually tell you that they'd like to be there. And then secondly, we get confirmation from the people that Dallas talks with, Paul and John, the 2 people who are the health specialists that have helped us with guidelines for what to do in the shop. Just get a confirmation that we can have 4 or 5 or 6 people in the room with you and Louis. And then you can just regulate who shows up. The rest of us will just join in via Zoom.
Absolutely, yes, and I should be able to see you guys for the first time, which would be nice. And yes, and we can probably open the windows and get some fans going and stuff like that as well to contribute to the healthful environment.
Yeah, and it worked out really well. Louis and I were in a class just last night in that room. That's why your room was sort of unsettled when you arrived today. But we had
it was unsettled when you arrived, didn't it?
It was unsettled when I arrived. Yes, big surprise. But beautiful if you open.
We'll have to coordinate.
Pardon?
We'll have to coordinate in future.
Yes, I think so. But the airflow was very good from there through the back. If you have the back door open, it was really, really wonderful. It felt very safe. It always does.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, we'll plan on that, and then if I don't hear from people who would like to join us, then we'll probably put out an email saying the first 4 that come. But hopefully you guys will actually want to see how ugly I am in person.
Well, I got
a question for you, Paul.
David will not drive or fly to come to a Saturday SIG. Am I right, David?
Well, who said? Why not?
Hey, Paul?
Yes.
I got a question for you.
Yes.
When you were using that angle jig for setting the angle for 3 holes, have you ever cut out like a piece of plywood stock to define those angles so that you can run your auger or a powered drill along a piece of plywood to maintain the angle that you need to get into the seat portion?
Oh, absolutely. And I think I mentioned that if I were making a run of these or making several of them, I would probably make something up where at least you had a plywood guide for your angles. But absolutely, you could set up a jig to where it was not much trouble to either use a brace and bit, or you can also buy this kind of bit that will fit, in long lengths, that will fit, into a cordless drill, an electric cordless drill.
And then,
So,
and then you just run the side of the auger along your plywood guide to define the angle. That does work.
I would think so. I've never tried it. I'm always, because I'm at the sort of, especially with this three-legged one, I'm at the design stage. I'm not worrying about that too much. But if I were making, say, 12 of these to go around a large table or something like that, then I would definitely consider, why wouldn't it work if you set up something with plywood, that as long as you set it up so that it didn't get altered each time you used it, then yeah, any jig would work. But at the design stage, but the old guys, it was, I presume, mostly old guys, but in the past, I think people got so that, a bit like some of these people that cut dovetails all the time, they get so they can do it by iron. They don't even have to lay it out,
Don't even need a jig. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, one of the advantages of something like a center bit when you're drilling through a solid block is that once you get in there, if you get in there and you go, I want a different angle, you've got room to swivel there, which you don't have with the brace and bit. So, I think in the past people did it by eye because you probably couldn't make money if you laid everything out. But again, you could easily make a jig for the layout where you had something you could just put on the underside of the seat, mark out your drill holes, and even mark out your angles if you wanted, and then move to the jig to actually guide your drill. But yeah, you could automate it all kinds of different ways if you want to. Any other questions?
Just a big thank you.
That's it. Thanks a lot, Paul.
Fantastic, Paul. Thanks.
Much appreciated.
Thank you very much for clocking in. I appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing you in person next time.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great.
All right,
Thanks.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Paul.